Okay, we are starting our next lecture on blood. I'm actually going to break the second lecture into two different videos to see if that will help with downloading it to your bundle where you stash it so that those of you that don't have internet access can watch it at home. So you're going to have two different videos to watch. You're going to have Blood.2a and Blood.2b. I'm still trying to keep them under 15 minutes when they're combined together. So here we go. Hematopoiesis is something we've already talked about, but we're just going to mention it again, that is the process of you making blood in your body. We're going to learn more about where it happens. It actually happens in your bone marrow, and typically it's in your flat bones mostly and a few of your long bones. So your flat bones would be like in your skull, your rib cage, your sternum and ribs, which is known as your thorax, and then your hip bones. And it's also in your arms and leg bones, the long bones like your humerus and femur. In particular, the bone marrow we're looking at is your red bone marrow. That's where the stem cells known as hemocytoblasts are located, and so that's where you're having the ability to make any of the cellular components of your blood. We're going to learn just about how you make red blood cells. So we're not going to learn specifically how you make white blood cells and platelets. Your red blood cells are the ones that are carrying the oxygen. So more than anything, it's important that you're able to carry oxygen. So how many red blood cells you have isn't nearly as important as how good are those red blood cells at carrying oxygen. So if you are not having the ability to carry oxygen as you should, you're going to produce this hormone in your kidneys called erythropoietin. That hormone will head to your bone marrow and create the hemocytoblast production of red blood cells. So it all has to do with whether or not you're efficiently transporting oxygen in your body. Red blood cells live to be about 120 days old. The first 3 to 5 days of their life is where they're going through maturation. So they are using all of their organelles to make hemoglobin, which would be in the DNA in the nucleus that is coding for you to make hemoglobin. And then after about 5 days, they will eliminate all of their cell organelles, including their nucleus, and then they just basically are like bags of hemoglobin that then go around and pick up oxygen. Within 120 days, they typically start to fragment and break apart. So then you use these white cells called phagocytes to go and eat them up so that they aren't causing trouble in your bloodstream anymore. And then you just make some new ones. Hemostasis, that is the scientific name for stopping blood, or what we would call blood clotting. There are 3 major phases that occur for hemostasis to happen in your body. The first phase is where once your vessel is damaged, whether it's torn or bruised, you're going to have vascular spasms, and that's going to cause your blood vessel the spasms are going to be caused by your blood vessel constricting. And the whole point of constricting your blood vessel is so that you stem the loss of your blood. And so vaso is vessel, constriction is smaller. And so that's where you're making your blood vessel smaller. That's what then causes the blood vessel to spasm. When that happens, the second phase takes place, which is where the platelets start to get sticky and they cling to the damaged site in the vessel wall. And so they start to dam up into that vessel wall, as you can see in the picture here. And then the final phase is coagulation, where the blood actually clots. And that needs to call on some other clotting factors that are in the plasma, some of those plasma proteins, and the one we're going to learn about is fibrin. And fibrin forms the mesh like structure that traps your red blood cells and keeps them from continuing to leak out of your vessel wall. And that's what a bruise is. When you see a bruise, that's the leaking out of those blood vessels, and they have that darker color as they die. So that's why they kind of turn a weird color, and they can go from being, kind of a purpley to even a green or a yellow color sometimes as your bruise heals. So fibrin is what's trapping those red blood cells. That's why they often put on gauze on an injury, because it'll act kind of like the fibrin until the fibrin can get there, and then it'll help with the forming of that scab. It takes about 3 to 6 minutes for the whole process to occur, and once you've got the clotting started, then you want to stop the production of more clotting, because you don't want to cause widespread clotting in your body. Some disorders that deal with hemostasis are a thrombus. A thrombus is a clot that's occurring in a vessel that's not damaged, and this can cause different problems with your circulation if the clot's big enough. Sometimes the thrombus can even detach itself from the vessel wall, and that's going to be called an embolus. And then you can have that embolus traveling to different places, and if it gets in a vessel that's too small, it can cause things like a stroke or a heart attack or other types of damage in the body. So things that can cause that thrombus to form and then detach itself. Anytime that you damage the vessel wall, you roughen up the vessel wall, can cause that. So things like burns and physical blows and accumulations of fat in your vessel walls can all cause those thrombus to form and then maybe detach and become an embolus. Thrombocytopenia is where you don't make enough of your platelets, because thrombocyte is a platelet, and penia means deficiency. This is where you have a deficiency of platelets. And so if you have few platelets, then any time that you're even moving around, sometimes you can get spontaneous bleeding. And then this is going to create those bruises, those purplish blotches on your skin, which can be known as petechia. And so anything that's going to suppress the bone marrow from making your platelets or any other part of your blood, in this case specifically your platelets, that's going to cause problems, and in this case it's thrombocytopenia. Hemophilia is another hemostasis disorder where you have trouble clotting your blood because you are lacking some of the clotting factors, or you're making them incorrectly. So those plasma proteins known as clotting factors or clotting proteins, you have DNA that codes for you to make those, and if you don't make them or you don't make them properly, then you have blood clotting problems, and you might bleed out when you get injured. So many times they have to rush them to the hospital to get a shot that forces their blood to clot. We'll save the next video for your human blood groups, so to watch the second video, please.